Introduction. Turning 60 is often seen as the beginning of the final chapter. Society tends to whisper, or sometimes shout, that after a certain age, we should slow down, settle in, and accept the status quo. But what if that narrative is wrong? What if turning 60 is not an ending, but an incredible new beginning? This video is a celebration of second chances. It's about people who, despite what the world may have expected of them, chose to start over. They didn't let the number of candles on their birthday cake define their possibilities. They chose transformation, courage, and reinvention. And in doing so, they became shining examples of what's possible at any age. Maybe you felt it yourself, that tug in your heart saying there's more to life. Maybe you've retired and are wondering what now? Or you've faced loss, change, or even failure, and you're standing at the edge of what could be your next chapter. This video is for you. It's here to say, you're not alone, and it's not too late. We'll explore 5 powerful stories, real people who decided to rewrite their life scripts after 60. These aren't fairy tales. They're stories of struggle, resilience, and ultimately, triumph. And whether it was starting a business, rediscovering a lost passion, moving to a new country, healing a broken relationship, or finding love again, each story carries a lesson of hope and courage. Reinvention isn't about becoming someone completely different. It's about reconnecting with the truest version of yourself, the one that may have been buried under years of responsibility, routine, or doubt. It's about asking, what do I want now? And honoring that answer, no matter how bold or simple it may be. In a world that often forgets to celebrate the wisdom and richness of age, we are here to say, your voice matters. Your dreams matter. And if you're feeling that pull towards something more, something new, trust it, because the truth is, you can reinvent yourself at 60, 70, or even 90. Let's dive in. Chapter 1, The Artist Within, Rediscovering a Lost Passion at 62. When Linda turned 62, she was newly retired, recently divorced, and uncertain about what came next. For decades, her life had been about raising children, managing a household, and holding down a job that paid the bills but never truly fulfilled her. She was proud of all she had accomplished. But as the rhythm of her days slowed, a silence settled in, a silence that felt more like a void than peace. One morning, while sorting through old boxes in her attic, Linda found a worn sketchbook. Inside were drawings she had made in her 20s, portraits, landscapes, abstract expressions of emotion. She hadn't picked up a pencil for over 30 years. Tears welled up as she turned the pages, not just for nostalgia, but from the aching realization of how much she had buried a part of herself. That moment became the spark. Linda didn't make a grand announcement or a bold resolution. She simply bought a new set of pencils and began to draw again, quietly, hesitantly. Her hands were rusty, but her soul remembered. Each stroke reconnected her to a version of herself she had long forgotten. The dreamer, the creator, the woman who once believed she had something to say through her art. As the weeks passed, her sketchbooks filled. Her confidence grew. She enrolled in local art classes, surrounded by others who, like her, were stepping into their creativity later in life. What began as a private journey soon turned public. She opened a small Instagram account to share her work anonymously. To her surprise, people responded, not just with likes, but with stories, encouragement, and admiration. At 64, Linda held her first exhibition in a local community center. Dozens came, friends, family, and even strangers. The walls were lined with vivid canvases that told the story of a woman who had dared to dream again. "You inspired me," one woman told her, "to pick up my violin after 40 years." Linda didn't reinvent herself by becoming someone else. She became more of who she truly was. In rediscovering her passion, she found purpose. And in expressing herself, she healed parts of her heart she hadn't even realized were broken. Her story reminds us that reinvention doesn't require reinvention of identity, but a return to authenticity. The things that lit us up when we were young often still live inside us, waiting patiently for the moment we finally give them space to breathe again. So if you're feeling lost or uncertain after 60, ask yourself, what did I once love before the world told me it didn't matter? The answer could be the beginning of a beautiful new chapter. Chapter 2, The Courage to Begin Again, a new business at 67. John had always dreamed of owning his own cafe. In his 20s, he'd worked as a barista while studying literature, imagining someday he'd open a small place filled with books, music, and the comforting aroma of fresh brewed coffee. But life, as it often does, led him elsewhere. He became a high school teacher, married, raised 3 children, and shelved that dream for someday. Fast forward to age 67. John had been retired for 2 years. His wife had passed away, and his children were living across the country. The house felt quiet, too quiet. He missed the daily energy of teaching, the conversations, the small connections. More than anything, he missed feeling like he was building something. That's when he remembered the cafe. With no business experience and limited savings, John faced every reason not to do it. But something had shifted in him. The idea no longer felt like a fantasy. It felt like a necessary act of self-respect. He didn't want to end his days wondering what could have been. He started small. He converted his garage into a cozy coffee corner where neighbors could stop by. He served coffee, tea, and homemade pastries. He put out a few books and encouraged people to stay, read, and talk. Word spread. People loved it, not just for the coffee, but for the warmth, the human connection, the feeling of being seen. After a year, John took the leap and rented a small storefront in his neighborhood. He called it Second Cup, a nod to second chances and the idea that it's never too late for a new beginning. He decorated the space with vintage furniture, shelves of secondhand books, and old photographs. Local musicians played on weekends. Retirees, students, and artists all mingled over cappuccinos and conversations. By 70, John had built not just a business, but a community. His cafe became a hub for connection and creativity. He wasn't chasing profit, he was building purpose. And in doing so, he inspired others, especially those his age, to see retirement not as the end, but as the space where long-held dreams can finally be lived out. John's story is a powerful reminder. You don't need to be young to be bold. Reinvention requires courage, not a resume. Passion, not perfection. If there's something in your heart that refuses to be quiet, listen to it. Whether it's a cafe, a garden, or a new skill, the act of building something new at any age is one of the most life-affirming things we can do. So, what dream have you put on the shelf for someday? What would it take to begin just a little today? Chapter 3, A New Home, A New Life, Moving Abroad at 65. Margot had lived her entire life in the same city. A comfortable suburban neighborhood filled with familiar faces, familiar routines, and the comforting predictability of home. But after her children moved away and her retirement set in, comfort began to feel like confinement. She wasn't unhappy, but she wasn't inspired either. Deep down, she felt an urge to shake things up. Something radical, something just for her. At 65, while watching a documentary about life in southern Portugal, she felt something stir. The cobblestone streets, the sun-drenched cafes, the slower pace of life. It all felt oddly personal, like a memory from a life she hadn't yet lived. That evening, she opened her laptop and typed "retire abroad after 60." It was the beginning of a journey that would change everything. Margot had never lived outside the United States. She spoke no Portuguese, had never traveled alone internationally, and had only a modest pension. But she couldn't ignore the pull. Over the next 6 months, she researched, joined expat forums, and even took online language lessons. Her friends thought she was joking. Her children were skeptical. Is this safe? What if you get lonely, they asked. But Margot wasn't driven by fear. She was driven by the sense that if she didn't try this now, she never would. She rented a small apartment in a coastal village and bought a one-way ticket. The first few weeks were hard. Navigating paperwork, cultural differences, even shopping for groceries felt daunting. But she persisted. Locals welcomed her warmly, impressed by her courage and curiosity. She joined a walking club, started volunteering at an animal shelter, and began documenting her journey on a blog titled 65 and Free. Months turned into a year. Her Portuguese improved. Her days became filled with sunshine, new friendships, and a freedom she had never known. She hiked along cliffs, sipped espresso in plazas, learned to cook traditional dishes, and even fell in love with a fellow expat, a retired British photographer named Alan. For Margot, moving abroad wasn't an escape. It was a rebirth. She discovered that home isn't always where you've been. Sometimes it's where you choose to grow. Her courage shattered the notion that reinvention must be small or cautious. She proved that bold change, even at 65, is not just possible. It can be profoundly rewarding. Her story reminds us that sometimes reinvention means letting go of everything familiar to make space for what truly excites us. It asks us to rethink what we believe is too late or too risky. Because when we stop limiting ourselves, the world opens up. If you've ever dreamed of starting fresh somewhere new, ask yourself, what's truly stopping you? Sometimes, all it takes is a little bravery and a plane ticket. Chapter 4. Healing the Past. Rebuilding Family Bonds After 60. For many, the journey after 60 isn't about chasing new dreams. It's about healing old wounds. That was the case for Thomas, a 68-year-old retired engineer who had been estranged from his daughter for over 20 years. The rift had started over a misunderstanding that spiraled into years of silence, missed milestones, and unspoken grief. As he entered retirement, the quiet became deafening. Memories of his daughter as a child flooded back. Her laugh, her questions, the way she used to hold his hand on walks. The guilt, long buried under layers of pride and hurt, surfaced with an intensity that left him sleepless. He realized that the time he had left was too precious to spend estranged. Thomas didn't know if she would respond, or if she even wanted to hear from him. But one rainy afternoon, he sat down and wrote her a letter, not to defend himself, not to explain, but simply to say, "I miss you. I am sorry. And if there's room in your heart, I'd love to talk." Weeks passed. Then a reply arrived, brief but open. "Let's meet." The first meeting was tentative. Emotions ran high. Years of silence were not erased in a single conversation. But that letter had broken the ice. Over time, with patience and honesty, they talked more. They unpacked the pain and misunderstandings. Thomas listened, really listened, for the first time in years. Eventually, his daughter invited him to meet her children, his grandchildren. It was the first time he held them, and the moment was overwhelming. In that embrace, Thomas understood that reinvention doesn't always look like a new career or a bold adventure. Sometimes, it's the quiet, courageous work of repair, of reconciliation, of choosing love over ego. Today, they speak weekly. Holidays are shared again. There are still moments of tension, but they are handled with care and maturity. Thomas often says it's the greatest transformation of his life. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth everything. This chapter is a reminder that it's never too late to say sorry. Never too late to reach out. We often think others won't forgive us, or that too much time has passed. But forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about creating the space to move forward. It's about choosing connection over regret. If there's someone in your life you miss, someone you've drifted from or hurt, maybe now is the time. Even if the outcome is uncertain, the act of reaching out is a powerful step toward healing, and perhaps a second chance. Chapter 5. Finding Love Again. Opening the Heart at 70. When Susan lost her husband to cancer at 66, she was convinced her romantic life was over. Their marriage had lasted 41 years. He had been her first and only love, her confidant, her partner in every sense. After his death, her world became quieter, slower, and painfully empty. She filled her days with volunteering, gardening, and long walks, but a part of her heart remained locked away, guarded by grief and fear. For years later, at age 70, Susan was invited to a poetry reading at her local library. It was a gentle, cozy gathering, nothing grand. But during a break, she found herself chatting with Daniel, a retired history professor who had lost his partner the year before. Their conversation was warm and effortless. No sparks, no fireworks, just genuine connection. They kept bumping into each other at community events, eventually meeting for coffee, then lunch, then walks through the park. Susan was hesitant. The idea of dating again felt disloyal, even absurd. She often wondered, can love really happen again after all this time? Can you open your heart when it's been bruised and healed over? But as weeks passed, something beautiful unfolded. It wasn't about replacing her late husband. It wasn't about reliving youth. It was about sharing this stage of life with someone who understood both joy and loss, who didn't want perfection but presence. Their love was slower, gentler, and perhaps even deeper, fueled not by youthful passion, but by mature appreciation of time, trust, and companionship. They cooked together, laughed at old movies, and held hands as if rediscovering something sacred. It wasn't flashy, but it was profoundly real. At 72, Susan said yes to love again, not out of desperation, but from a place of self-respect and hope. She had reinvented her vision of partnership. It wasn't about erasing the past, but enriching the future. Her story teaches us that love doesn't expire with age. The heart remains capable of tenderness and connection, even after it has been broken. Sometimes the most powerful reinvention is not in what we do, but in how we allow ourselves to feel again, to trust, to risk, to open. If you've ever wondered whether your heart could feel again, whether love could return, Susan's story whispers yes. Not because it's guaranteed, but because it's possible. And possibility is the doorway to reinvention. Conclusion: the beauty of beginning again. Reinvention after 60 isn't a myth. It's a quiet revolution happening all around us, one brave decision at a time. The stories of Linda, John, Margot, Thomas, and Susan remind us that age is not a boundary. It's a backdrop. The backdrop to some of the most meaningful, powerful, and authentic chapters of our lives. These individuals didn't have superpowers. They had fear, doubt, grief, just like the rest of us. But they also had something else, the willingness to believe that life wasn't finished with them yet. That possibility still existed. That joy could still be found. Love could still surprise. Dreams could still unfold. The truth is, life after 60 can be one of the most dynamic stages of our existence. You have the freedom of time, the richness of experience, and the wisdom of knowing what truly matters. You've spent decades giving to others, building careers, supporting families. Now, perhaps it's time to turn inward, to ask, what do I want? What have I always longed to do, or feel, or say? Reinvention doesn't always look like starting a business or moving across the world. Sometimes it's starting therapy. Sometimes it's taking a class, or finally forgiving yourself. Sometimes it's as small and as profound as saying yes to something new. This video isn't just about inspiration, it's an invitation to remember that no matter your past, no matter what's been lost or delayed, you still have the power to create, to change, to love, to heal, and most importantly, to begin again. You're not too old. It is not too late. And the best parts of your story may still be unwritten. So take a deep breath. Look forward. The next chapter is yours to write. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to these stories. And thank you, most of all, for believing in the beauty of second chances. Thank you for staying with us until the end. Share in the comments what stood out to you in this video. We'd love to hear it. Your feedback means a lot. Subscribe to Thrive Beyond 60. Turn on the bell and join us for more videos. See you very soon.